Hi guys, I think you are really gonna like the video that I have to show you today. I'm gonna be showing you painting tips and tricks for you to use around your house. If you have company coming over, or if your kids have been running around and scuffing up your walls and you don't really wanna call a painting company to come and repaint your whole house and charge you, this is how you can go around your house and touch up those little imperfections that are driving you crazy. Okay, so the first tip I want to show you is how to store your paint. Paint cans like this can get jumbled up in your garage, and usually after the painters are done painting, they won't even look this nice. They will have paint all over them. The labels can be ripped off of them. They can be really hard to figure out what's inside of them. So what I like to do with my paint is take these large mason jars and pour what my painters have left me from the gallons into these. And what's awesome about these is if I need to just touch up something really small, I can easily remove the lid and I can replace the lid. Whereas with this type of gallon can, it's harder to pour, it makes a mess. This lip around the edge can get paint stuck in it, and then you have drips running down the side. It's just, and then you have to hammer it back on. When you go to shake it up, sometimes there will be a little crack in it and paint will fly across the floor. So there's just so many reasons that I don't like to keep these. Now, what I like to do is pour what I have left into these jars, and then I make sure to label with the color that I used, the sheen that the paint is, whether it is, usually the name, but especially whether it's an oil or a latex. And then usually I also add the year that I purchased the paint. So this is just an example of some of the different, and you don't just have to use a ball mason jar. This is just a pasta jar that I cleaned out, and it actually has some of my wall paint in it. So use any type of jar around your house. This is just a great way to store your paint. Now I'm going to show you how to do the touch up on your wall. I really like to use this 1.5 inch blue tape. And if you're just doing a section on your wall that's not close to any other colors, you really don't need to use this. But if you're going to be getting really close to the trim or cabinets, I like to go ahead and use this. And this is also how you will form a line. Like if you have these cracks, like in here from the weather where the caulking has cracked, this is how you can reapply the caulking. So I'm gonna go ahead and start to apply this tape. Make sure when you're applying this tape that you're putting it right along the edge of where your wall color meets your trim color. Just try to follow the line that the previous painter made, unless they did a really bad job, and then just make your new line where you want it to be. Now that we've got all the tape applied, run your finger along the edge just to make sure there's no bubbles and you have a really firm seal. Take one of these razor blades, and I like to make my tip about 1/4 of an inch. So cut it a little bit and then make sure it's just the right size. If you're worried about that, maybe cut it a little on the smaller side and then see if that's a big enough hole, and then just slowly make it bigger and bigger, because if it's too big, then there's no way to go back at that point. So now this is actually a clear caulking. You could also use a white caulking for this color, and it's paintable, it's interior and exterior, it works great. So I'll show you what I'm gonna do with this. I'm basically going to run a line of this all along where we just put that tape. Don't worry about it being super, oop, see how it messed up a little bit? That's okay. We'll go back and fix that. Just add a little bit more. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's why we have our tape there. Do that back side. And then we're gonna take our finger. I actually took my fingernails off for this. Oh, something else I didn't mention earlier. Make sure that you're not wearing something that you don't mind getting messy, because sometimes the things that you're working with, you can't get them out. So I like to put on old clothes. I take my fingernails off because this is the best way to do this. My favorite thing to use when I'm caulking is actually baby wipes, because there's a lot of them, and as you're getting this on your finger, you can just easily wipe it off as you go. Some professional painters like to use rags, but I like to use these because they're a little bit wet, and so they do a better job of cleaning my finger in between me smoothing out the caulking. So just make sure you have a really smooth line. See how that nicely filled in some of the cracks that we had? Up here, we had a crack that's now filled in with this. And then as we paint over it, we will not be able to see this. Also make sure that you don't leave any lines like this. If you have a little bit too much caulking at the top right here, then you're gonna be able to see that. So we wanna make sure that we smooth that out with the wall. The prep work is very, very important. If you don't have good prep work, you won't have a good final result. This is a tip from me. I used to help touch up houses. We actually own a painting company. That's one of the companies that my husband and I own. And when I was touching up houses, the paintbrushes that I found at the paint stores did not leave a good smooth application on cabinets and trim with the oil paint. And so this is actually one of my favorite brushes to use because of how the tip is cut. It doesn't leave that straight edge along the side and show you those brush strokes. And it's actually a makeup brush. I think it's like $3 at Walmart. So this is my favorite thing to use. We're actually going to use this to paint the wall paint along where we've caulked. And then I'm going to go wash it out, and we're gonna use this same brush on the oil paint that we're gonna paint on the trim. We are gonna use a roller on this, and so I've went ahead and put some of the wall paint into one of these little paint buckets that we can use to get the excess paint off from the roller. And we're just gonna put a little bit on our brush. This brush is actually really good as well at being able to apply a fairly heavy layer of paint. So now we're basically just painting along that line with this brush. And then we'll go up back with the roller, and we'll get right up to where we've applied this paint. Now that we have that whole line painted with our brush, now we're gonna be able to do the bigger section of wall with a roller. And I have a couple rollers here just to talk about the type of texture that you have. And if by chance you're using an oil-based paint, like if you have a paneled wall where you have like an oil-based paint with more of like a sheen, you're actually gonna wanna use something like this foam roller. And then these two are both fuzzy rollers. This one you can see is a lot flatter. I have smooth walls, and so I'm gonna be using this roller. But if you have a heavier texture, like a heavy orange peel or a knockdown texture, you're actually gonna wanna use this thicker texture that's gonna be able to get into the grooves of your wall. Sadly, I misjudged the size of my roller and the type of bucket that I like to use, and my roller will not fit. Now that we're not using the bucket that has the nifty little scraper that I can roll the excess paint off of this, we do have to be a little bit more careful. But if you're doing this at home and you're not a painter and you didn't have time to go to the store, you don't always have those handy tools. So what we're gonna do is be very careful as we roll this all the way around, kind of let it run off. Make sure not to get too much paint. I like to kind of roll it and then quickly We'll bring it to our wall. And we've already painted a line there over the caulking. This you want to be sure to get really nice and smooth. Okay, so as I was rolling, I noticed there's a little tiny hair in the wall. Since our paint is still wet, we can go ahead and just grab that out of it and just keep on going. Just keep on rolling until it looks really smooth and uniform. You don't want to see any streaks or any bumps. Over here, I accidentally got a little too close to where I painted with my brush. And so after I finish with this, I'm actually going to grab my brush back up, dip it into this paint, and just kind of smooth this out again. It's very forgiving. Okay, now that we've finished applying all the wall paint, this is the fun part, we get to take the tape off. Now, my line is not gonna be a perfect straight line because there was actually already some wall paint onto the trim, but I'm about to show you how to fix that. So first, let's start at the very top. Where you started taping, that's where you wanna pull off first, and then all your tape will come off in one big swoop. I've got paint all over me already. This is why you definitely don't want to wear new clothes while you're doing this. I'm going to go rinse out this brush and then we're going to come back and use it on the trim. You could actually wait for your wall to dry and then tape the same line on the wall so that you don't get the trim paint back onto the wall. But if you're a pretty good painter and steady with your hands, I think you can do this without the blue tape. So let me go rinse this out and I'll be right back. Now let's apply the trim paint. This is usually gonna be an oil paint, so it's a little harder to work with than your wall paint, which is usually an acrylic. That means that this paint is going to dry quicker. If you're using something like my special brush here, there's also other paint brushes that are for oil that are small that are easy to find that you can use as well. But when we apply this, we're gonna have to put it on pretty quickly and then you're not gonna be able to rinse out your brush with water. So make sure you either have acetone, which is like fingernail polish remover, or a brush cleaner. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got my trim paint here in my mason jar. That way I can do this a little bit easier. And like I said, you can wait until this wall paint dries and tape it off to make sure you, and just do the exact same thing with the caulking along this edge to get a perfectly straight line. But I'm actually going to just use the paintbrush and just cut in a perfectly straight line with that edge. And here you can see where a little bit of my wall paint was on. Now another tip with this oil paint is you don't want to go back over it too many times. Once you've got it on, it should self-level quite a bit by itself, but if you run the brush over it too many times, it's going to leave the brush strokes. It's kind of like fingernail polish, how if you keep going back over your nail over and over and over, it doesn't look as good as if you get it right the first time. This area of trim is right next to the door that my kids come in and out all the time. So you can see it's got lots of scuffs. I almost forgot to show you guys what to do whenever you get to the bottom of your trim. Now, some people like to caulk this, but I don't, because whether you know it or not, your floor actually expands and contracts, even the non-wood type floors. So I don't like to do the caulking along there because then it's going to crack just like where you see it for your trim. So what I like to do is I like to take this blue tape and I like to just try to get it as close as I can. And then whenever you brush up next to it, you're actually going to brush with the tape and make sure not to put too much, and then go ahead and remove it, and you should get a perfectly straight line, especially if you're using really good tape. See how much better this looks now? I will warn you though, once you get started, you're going to find yourself moving around your whole house, touching up every little thing, and it's hard to stop. But it's such a wonderful skill to know how to do. That way, in case an accident happens or Christmas decorations scratch up your wall or you're moving furniture, you're able to touch that up and you don't have to just leave that mark there until the next time the painters come. So I really hope that you learned something in this video today, and please like and subscribe to my channel and check back for more videos from the House of Barnes.